Get underway. So over the course of the next hour, we're going to be joined by lots of leading voices from the Fabian Society, including senior shadow cabinet ministers led by Annalisa Dodds, and lots of members of the Fabian Society who you won't have heard of, but who will be telling you a little bit about why the Fabians matters to them as well. Normally, at this time, a real Labour Party conference rather than a virtual Labour Party conference, we have an event which we call the Year in Review, where we look back at what happened over the political year that's just passed and where the Labour Party stands. And if we were doing that event tonight, I know we would have an awful lot to discuss. And in the 12 months since the last Labour Party conference, we've had the Brexit quagmire. We've had a nightmare election, we've had a leadership election, the global pandemic, the gradual reopening of society, and now with the news from the scientists today, it seems the reclosing to a large extent of society as well. And all, of course, with the Brexit in the background. So it's been a tumultuous year of politics, and the Labour Party has at times been at the heart of that. At other times, it's not had enough influence and say because, of course, we lost that election and aren't in a position to get what we say is important actually happening. The most important thing about elections is whether you win or lose. And I think that that comes across particularly when you look at the incompetence, the illegality, the indecision of this Conservative government. And to see Boris Johnson, the most ill-equipped Prime Minister we could possibly imagine, leading the country at this time of national crisis, really underscores why it is a disaster when the Labour Party loses elections. But we want to be positive tonight and look forward to winning in the future. And I'm delighted we're going to be joined by a brilliant panel of Fabians who are going to be discussing just that. We wanted, rather than to talk about the Labour Party at large, to have a particular focus tonight on the Fabian Society and Fabian members, because the position of the Fabians in the Labour movement and the Labour Party really has come to the fore over the last 12 months, and particularly with Keir's election as Labour leader. Keir Starmer plucked from the obscurity of a member of the Fabian Society Executive Committee and elected to lead our party. Sadly, one of his first decisions was that he would have to give up his membership of the Fabian Society's board, given his new commitments, a decision that was fully understood by our membership. But other members of his new shadow team have stayed on, and I'm delighted to say that we have 5 members of the Fabian board as shadow ministers, and many other active Fabian parliamentarians on the front bench as well. But just as important as having all those fantastic Fabian MPs and peers in Keir Starmer's shadow team is the fact that the Fabian Society's values, Fabianism, really feels like it's making a comeback within our thinking as the Labour Party and in the Labour movement. The Fabian Society has always been known for its inclusivity and non-factionalism, a pluralistic, tolerant approach to politics, which is, again, coming back into fashion. We've always known as an organisation and a part of the Labour movement committed to thoughtful, considered debate, listening to other people's opinion and treated them with respect, but also with analytical qualities, looking for the right answers in terms of the evidence and the reasoning behind things, rather than just buying into our own propaganda. And we've always been the part of the Labour movement that has been committed to our radical socialist ends, but also to getting the means right, to practical policy that will actually work, as well as being true to our values. And all of that could never be more important than at this time when the Labour Party has to come back a very long way to power, but also has to come up with practical answers to oppose this government in its disastrous handling of the pandemic and of our relationship with other countries around the world. There are two things that really matter for the Labour Party and the Labour movement. The first is to construct a programme of change for the country and for our communities, which has got big change that people will really notice, that will affect their lives, but also is workable and deliverable. And the second thing that really matters is Labour politicians winning power. To have a platform that is popular and workable. And the Fabians are at the heart of both of that. An awful lot of my work as General Secretary is to lead our research projects. And our research projects typically look at getting the right mix between the three points on a triangle, as we say in the office, making sure that the politics of an issue are right, that we've got our values, and that the values of the left are in everything we're doing, that the technical detail, the policy is right, but also that we can make policy that works with public opinion, and get all those three right, and you're in the right position. And that's what the Fabian Society's research programme does, and it's now what the Labour Party itself is committed to. But the Fabians is not just about research and policy thinking. It's not just about publishing pamphlets and reports. It's about our members. It's a network right across the country, which is not just about ideas, but it's about bringing together like-minded people to share those ideas, to build them up, and often as the next generation of talent for the Labour Party. And I'm delighted that in the next hour, we're going to be bringing together lots of people from the Fabian network who are part of that community of like-minded people. We're going to hear from 4 shadow ministers who are members of the Fabian Executive Committee. We're going to hear from Fabians in Scotland and Wales and local government. We're going to hear from the young Fabians. And first of all, my next guest is the chair of the Fabian Women's Network, who do amazing work supporting women in the Labour Party and in politics to develop their confidence and skills and make, sort of be the next generation of talented women in the Labour Party. So I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker tonight, Sarah Hyde, who is the chair of the Fabian Women's Network.
Hello, good evening. Thanks so much for having us, and great to hear your introduction there, Andy. It is such an exciting time to be part of the Fabian Society, to be part of this movement for evidence-based, erudite policy and research. It is my absolute honour and privilege to be the chair of the Fabian Women's Network. We are a nationwide network of sisters who both help women who maybe don't have such a political background in terms of party politics to access party politics, as well as helping people along their journey when they are already engaged. It's wonderful to be here at this virtual event, a little bit different to normal, can't quite feel the roar of the crowd, the smell of the grease paint, all of that you normally get at a conference. I also haven't been up till 3 AM doing karaoke, so I think you're going to have a much fresher panel maybe this evening, dare I say, than you might normally get in the kind of crowd, and the acoustics are better actually in my house than a lot of the places that you normally have to speak at conference. So you're very welcome. Thank you for spending this time with us this evening, just to kind of celebrate some of the things that are going on in the different parts of the UK, and as Andy's alluded to, Scottish Fabians, things that are happening in Wales, and now our shadow front bench, absolutely packed full, and almost like an embarrassment of Fabians, I might say. Is that the collective noun? On the front bench, and delighted to have this opportunity to work really closely with the leadership in terms of making those crucial gains for our country, both in next year's elections, May 2021, as well as, of course, the general election a bit further down the track. Fabian Women's Network has had an exercise where we looked again at our values, and we've come up with a strapline to really exemplify what our work is all about. It's about sisterhood. It's coming together, supporting our sisters. It's about solidarity, that we stand with each other, that our collective endeavour is far more than we could ever achieve on our own. And it's about service. We want to do stuff to serve each other, to serve our country, to promote other people before we look to promote ourselves and our own interests. And that to us kind of is a good summary of our socialism, our sisterhood, our solidarity, and our service. And my word, I feel like this country has never more needed leaders and politicians that understand about public service and are seeking the good of others before their own good. We've never needed this kind of thoughtful, evidence-based research so much as it feels like we need now. The kind of outputs that the Fabians are constantly doing. We need this kind of thought through evidence-based policy work that are rooted in those values of equality and compassion. You know, in this year where we've seen all the inequalities that COVID has brought to light, the Black Lives Matter movement highlighted what many of us who've been working at the sharp end of society have known for a long time, that we are living in a country that is profoundly unequal and still today is full of white supremacy and structural racism. And it is absolutely the heart of what we're looking at FWN to tackle, you know, to engage with that and make sure in our work that we're bringing an anti-racist agenda at in every element of what we are doing. And it's an exciting time to be part of the Fabians and the Labour Party, because that people are really starting to see some of these things that have been hidden. They've been very obvious to many for a long time, but for some people this is new news, and it just feels like this is a really important moment for our country to turn away from lots of awful legacies and start to create bold new directions. And I think being involved in a policy think tank like the Fabians, which is also all about network, relationship, coming together, is a brilliant crucible for that stuff to happen. Of course, we're delighted to see so many prominent Fabian women as well in the Shadow Cabinet, and our ceiling smasher Annalisa Dodds giving an excellent speech earlier, and had a long relationship with Angela Rayner. She's been so encouraging of our mentoring scheme. Kate Green, the former Fabian chair, also completely delighted to see her really, and her brilliant brain, able to get going a shadow education, although she was doing a grand job in the child poverty brief before that. So we're delighted to see our sisters kind of powering on, and across regional and national government as well. I have to mention Jessie Jacobs, who we're hoping is going to be the Labour Mayor of Tees Valley in May 2021, as well as our candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner in Durham. If you want to get involved or find out more, we would love hearing from our members. Please do connect with us. We would love to help you in your journey. So keep outreaching, keep evidence and research and good gritty policy at the front of your Labour fight for a good government, and be kind, people. It's flipping hard out there at the moment. And so I think we're all learning how to exist in a new way, and our politics needs our solidarity, our kindness, you know, our ability to come together and really believe in that collective endeavour with the kind of amazing work the Fabians are doing behind us. Thanks so much. I don't know who the next speaker is. Am I handing back to you, Anne? Oh.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So our next speaker is one of those you just talked about. It's leading member of the Shadow Cabinet and also former chair of the Fabian Society, has been a huge support to all of the Fabian team and me personally so many times over the years. Delighted that she has the platform and the national position that she deserves. Please welcome our Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green.
Well, thank you very much, Andy. Lovely to virtually see everybody. Sarah said that because we're not trailing around the bars of some seaside town or other, we're all fresher. I have to tell you, I'm not fresh at all. This is my 7th fringe of the day. I've clearly decided that our virtual conference stretches even beyond the bounds of a physical conference, the defiance of science and the belief that you can turn up at 3 fringes in 3 different places all at once. I think I've overreached myself tonight, but it is a great pleasure for my final fringe of the evening to be with the Fabian Society. And I just want to say to Sarah, we're not embarrassed at all about the number of Fabians on the front bench. We think that's a very good thing, and we're absolutely delighted to see the society being in a position where the brilliant ideas and the carefully thought through ideas, the well-evidenced and well-researched ideas, as you say, can be placed central to Labour's policy programme. And for us, that's immensely exciting, because fundamentally that is the purpose of the Fabian Society, to be able to secure for a Labour government a policy programme that is true to our values, that improves people's lives, that is based on the evidence, and most crucially of all, that actually works. And it is that policy that lives in the real world that I think is one of the great strengths of the Fabians' work, and has done over the 35 years of our existence, that we have been in the vanguard of radical life-changing policy thought, but that policy thought has translated into action and has underpinned the success of previous Labour governments. And I'm very confident that Fabian thinking will underpin the success of the next Labour government under Keir Starmer, Fabian himself, in 2024 or sooner, if the government decide to cut and run. And I do think that there's a huge opportunity now for Fabian thinking to cut right through, not just because we've got so many of our Fabian members in positions on the front bench, but also because I think the circumstances we're living through now are a space where Fabian thought can really matter, can really make a difference and thrive. Because the events of the last few months, the COVID crisis, in fact, the Brexit debacle, which the COVID crisis comes on the heels of, and the Johnson premiership, I think are going to point up very, very starkly over the next few years in the run up to the next general election, the damage that can be done when we cede the role of the state, when the state backs away from its obligations and its role in improving people's lives. And Fabian thinking has always been around the power of the state to be a force for change and a force for good. And I think we are in a space now where that thinking, that imagining, and those policies really have a chance to come to the fore. And that is where we should be reasserting our leadership among think tanks and developing those policy ideas. So it is a really exciting time to be a Fabian. I think it was exciting. There were signs it was going to be exciting this year, even before so many Fabians ended up in the front bench team. Had you been at our conference in January, when we were still allowed to meet physically, it was one of the best, most buzziest Fabian conferences I can remember in years. There's a real appetite, I think, now for what Fabian thinking can be about, how it can be bold, imaginative, creative, and radical. It's a great time to be a Fabian and to be on board. So thank you for joining us this evening. We are really pleased and proud to be such a vibrant and exciting society with so many different constituent parts, young Fabians, Fabian women, our local societies, our policy groups, Fabians in Scotland, Fabians in Wales. We're delighted to have such a broad-based membership across the country and across the different elements of Labour's future electoral success. And because we're so lucky to be such a well-based society, that gives us a huge chance to draw on your ideas and your experience to ensure that the policy programme that we can help develop for the next state Labour government meets the needs of everyone everywhere in this country and truly improves and transforms lives.
Kate, thanks so much. I should have said right at the start that as part of the success of the society over the last 9 months, we've also reached our highest ever membership with over 8,000 active Fabians. But we're never too large. We're always wanting to hear from more people. So if you aren't a member already, then go to our website and you can join tonight. Now, my next speaker is Councillor Abigail Marshall-Cattung, who is a councillor from Leeds City Council and a member of the Fabian Women Executive. Abby is going to give us a perspective from Fabians in local government.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's an absolute delight to be amongst you. It's lovely to see Kate and Sarah, feels like home, Fabian sisters, who have actually been guiding and helping and holding our hands through. Being a Fabian has actually been a delight and has actually helped in terms of the networking and connecting. For me as a Fabian, one of the main reasons why I actually joined the Fabian Society is because of its inclusivity as well as its non-factional ethos. Now, since becoming a Fabian and also joining the Fabian Women's Network, as Sarah said, you know, we thrive on sisterhood, on solidarity, and on service. My father taught me this, and he says, you educate to serve. And as elected members of council, what are we elected to do? And that's to serve. If we look at what's happened in the last 5-6 months and where we are right now with the pandemic, as elected members, what do you do? Sarah mentioned kindness. When people want to know that you care is when you show that you care. We were faced with a pandemic that we were not prepared to do. But what we did as a local government, which is great, and I tell you that if there's anything that I am grateful for that I have learned in the last 5-6 months, is the collaboration of the third sector and volunteers within the community. People have come together like no any other time to put together whatever resources they could to ensure that our constituents are listened to. Across the 33 wards in Leeds, the council was able to nominate a single third sector that was going to meet the needs of constituents in this very difficult time. For my ward where I serve, which is a very multicultural ward, we were able to set up the first cultural hub in the city, and the help and support that we received from lots of friends, family, and lots of Fabian sisters was immeasurable. So I will continue to say that as elected members, as members of the Fabians, there's one thing that we do for sure is when we put our heart out to work and serve the community that we do, we actually do it. Now, Sarah forgot to also say, in terms of membership as well, I believe the Fabian women have also increased their membership, which is wonderful, because when you see more people coming together, then that means we're doing something right. And that whole network that is bringing us together in one common purpose to serve has been immense. Also, another example is when we had, when the sad death of George Floyd, lots were happening within the country. Different people were showing solidarity in different ways. We came together. We had the Black Sisters meeting where we wanted to know what people thought. And these are the things that lots of people want to know. What are you doing about all of these things? How do you represent us? And with the Fabian sisters, we put out a statement which people can check to see on our website as well. And we're ensuring that at every level of our decision making and meetings, we have people from diverse backgrounds that are represented and their voices are being heard. So yes, in terms of all the different things that we do and the projects that we do, we are being heard, we are being represented, and we make sure that together we sing in the same tune, and we're ensuring that when people are not certain about what we do, please, it's for us as a broad church, we are always there to clarify when people need clarity on anything and on what we do. In terms of our research and projects as well, one of the things that's attracted me to the Fabian Society is your research on poverty. Now, if we look at what's happened, especially again in the last 5 months, that has really exposed the level of poverty that we have in the UK. As someone who's come from a third world country to come and live here, people in the third world think, this is the first world and we are living in milk and honey. We should have no poverty. When I came to England the first time and I saw people begging on the streets, I was shocked, because from where I have come from, we don't see such things on TV. All we see is number 10 and all the beautiful houses. But yet, in COVID and in this current pandemic, we know people who live day to day and they do not know where the next meal is going to come from. So the research that we're doing at the Fabians on poverty is fantastic. And I plead people, if you're watching, take time to read, go on the website and see all the wonderful things that we are doing regarding poverty. And it's one of the strands that we're currently working on in my council at the moment in terms of poverty and deprivation, and trying to make sure we tackle right from the grassroots, right through the top. So I will not want to take too long of your time, but I want to say I am really, really delighted to be part of the Fabians, and I encourage as many people as possible to please join us. We have the FWN North, which was also recently formed in May, thanks to Sarah and the rest of the executives who have joined us, and it gives us the platform that Northern women in England can come together, because our challenges are slightly different from our FW women in the South. So yes, look out for what we do. Join us if you've got any ideas. please do not hesitate to contact us. So thank you so much for having me. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thanks also for plugging our research on poverty. We released a major report just before the last election, which fed into Labour Party policy thinking. And we've got some exciting projects coming up that we will be telling you all about very soon on poverty and inequality and social security. Now, I'm delighted to bring in Adam Ulnut, who is the chair of the Young Fabians. I'm exhausted by how much the Young Fabians have done this year and publishing things just this week. Adam, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. And it's great to follow some brilliant speakers. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'll try not to cover a lot of what's already been said, but I'd just like to say it's been a real privilege to be the chair of the Young Fabians this year. Bringing us up to the standard where I knew we could be. With my brilliant committee, a brilliant set of activists. I can't thank them enough for their activism this year. The Young Fabians is the training ground for the future of the left and a platform for young members. Since November 2019, we've held over 170 events, including a fringe of 11 events at this year's conference, the largest programme the Young Fabians has ever put on. We've hosted over 40 Labour MPs and Lords with countless other journalists, academics and notables. This year, we'll be publishing 8 policy reports on international accountability on climate change, how we measure progress, is it GDP or happiness of a population, the accessibility of the political ecosystem, the development of artificial intelligence in the United Kingdom, an analysis of the Metro Mayor system, a report on the upcoming Holyrood elections and the topics Scottish Labour need to address, a deep look at the Labour Party's culture policy and our need to be better, and an alternative health manifesto with a focus on mental well-being. Pre-pandemic, we sent 4 delegations to European events, including a group of 16 to the European Parliament, the second last to attend whilst we were EU members, and a group to help build the youth portion of the European-wide Green New Deal. We are the youth section of the Labour movement that is the most engaged in youth European politics. We've co-opted on 5 committee members whose impact has been amazing, from growing in Scotland to a flourishing blog. I can't thank them enough. We've hosted the Young European Socialists for their first committee meeting in the UK in living memory, with 60 delegates from over 30 different social democratic parties across Europe, and myself and my Vice Chair Carolina attending their Leaders Summit in Brussels. We've launched groups in the regions and the nations of the United Kingdom, and a huge thanks to all those involved. We have and will continue to devolve power and platform to our members, regardless of where they are. We will be launching an LGBTQIA+ advocacy group to speak up for our progressive values, stand with our friends, and act on being a good ally. We'll be bringing together a host of constitutional reforms to ensure, among other things, we have a women's officer post that can continue to build on our connection with the brilliant work of the Fabian Women's Network and others in the Fabian family. The final piece to our puzzle will be a mentorship programme that reflects the success of FWN's, focused on younger members of the Fabian Society who need to get the crumbs of experience and access to networks that can give them a leg up. We'll do this by the appointment of an honorary president and a group of vice presidents that include MPs, lords, captains of industry, think tank professionals and others in the political ecosystem, given their time to help our young members. All this whilst having a general election, a leadership election and a global pandemic. It's not been bad. All this points to one thing: the rise of Fabianism within the Labour Party. As Andy said, for the first time in history, someone from the Fabian Society exec has been elected leader, and every MP on the exec is a shadow minister. This is a game changer for the Young Fabians, giving us more access to the front bench than we've ever had before, and that means one simple thing: opportunity for our members. We can only do this by creating a positive environment so that we can recruit the future leaders of the left and ensure we hand down those crumbs of experience that become gold dust to build someone's career. We need more near-peer activists putting down ladders for young activists to climb up and help others build experience with more positive role models, laying down paths for young activists to follow. It is that near-peer element that is crucial in the development of the Young Fabians. The Young Fabians is the best placed left-leaning youth organisation to develop the talent of the future. We are the training ground for the future of policymakers and influencers and the future leaders of the left. My call to young progressive activists is to get involved. We can offer you the development pathways that will help you become a policymaker, whether it's aligned to a shadow minister and their team to discuss a policy and get them to an event, the ability to run and take part in a wide variety of occasions with huge ranges of people, the networking opportunities that have come up this year with European partners, think tanks, the British South Asian Youth Summit, parliamentarians and so many others, the ability to contribute and manage the publication of policy reports that are held on file at the LSE. You just can't do all those things anywhere else. We're the place you should be to build your experience.
Adam, thank you so much. Our next two speakers bringing our Scottish and Welsh perspectives for the evening. First of all, I'm delighted to welcome Katrina Munro, who's the chair of the Scottish Fabians.
Thanks, Andy. I'm privileged to be the Scottish convener and the vice chair of the Fabians Society. And as I was thinking about what I'd say tonight, I had a quick look at my bookcase and I was struck by the important and influential research and policy papers, which have really become the bedrock of Labour policy. First one I came across was Why the Right is Wrong by Gordon Brown. So true, still true. Together, a vision of whole person care for a 21st century health and care service. It still needs to be said. And the green crunch, why we need new economics for Britain's environmental challenge, definitely still relevant. But that's just to name a very few. What strikes me is that many of the issues that are tackled in these papers now seem like they're a given, but back in the noughties, they really weren't. Perhaps less prescient was in or out Labour and the euro. Oh, how we wish that that was still today's debate. And how Labour can learn to stop worrying and trust the people. That didn't quite turn out how we would have liked. But as Andy said at the outset, the Fabian Society isn't just about important research and policy papers. It's mostly about its members. It's about the Fabian Women's Network, and as Sarah said, has given countless women the confidence to enter politics. And it's about the young Fabians who nurture politicians and participants in public life of tomorrow. In Scotland, for the last 10 years or so, the divisive independence debate has polarised the population. You're either for or against independence, and everything is seen through that prism. But our recent polling, part of an important research project that's co-funded by FEPS, shows that at the moment, most Scots think that independence is actually a distraction, and they want the Scottish Government to get on with its day job of governing. Given this, there's surely still some space to talk about the real issues: COVID, the impending recession, jobs, climate change, those issues that affect daily lives. And that's where the Fabians can really offer new thinking for Scottish Labour and a forum for Labour members to debate ideas. We can also talk about the Constitution, but not all the time. Labour has to win in Scotland to win back power at Westminster, so it matters to all of you, not just to those in Scotland. Of course, for any political grouping, there are good times and there are bad times, times when you're in the ascendancy and times when you're not. But now at least it feels as though Labour has a real will to win. Of course, it's helped by having such a fantastic front bench, including those here tonight. We have got a mountain to climb, but at least we have the equipment and the team to do it. And the Fabian Society needs to be part of that support team to achieve it.
Katrina, thank you very much. Now I've got huge pleasure to welcome Julie James, who is a cabinet member. I nearly said shadow cabinet member. We are in power in Wales. Cabinet member in the Welsh Government for Housing and Local Government. Julie, it's fantastic to have you join us.
Thanks very much, Andy, and it's really lovely to be here. One of the big benefits of the pandemic is that we can take part in things like this, which has always been really difficult for Wales because we've never been able to persuade the way that we do business in the Senedd. We've never been able to persuade the other parties to let us have the conference weeks off. So it's always a terrible rush to get back and forth and so on. So I'm delighted to be here. I was just going to do a quick canter through what it's like to actually be in power and be a Fabian. Because one of the things about Wales, obviously, is that Labour is in power and we're able to put our policy-based, evidence-based proposals into practice. And the other thing is that we're very small. So only 3.2 million people. There are only 12 of us in the government, 12 Labour in the government. We've got 2 non-Labour members of the cabinet. And I cover housing and local government, but I also cover planning, child poverty, fair work, social partnership. There's a long, long list of things. And the only way that you can really do justice to that is if you've got a good think tank behind you who's prepared to feed you ideas, help your special advisors get those ideas and help us translate them into practice. So I'm just going to give you one example of the host of things that we've been up to. But as a result of the pandemic, we've been able in Wales to house over 2,200 people in a population of 3.2 million. So an enormous number of people. Far more than we thought were rough sleeping or sofa surfing. And we've been able to do that because we've been able to put into practice the Housing First principles and the collaborative working that which have long been our values as Fabians and as Labour Party members. And we've been able to do that because we've been able to work in collaboration with our local authority partners and our third sector partners, our charity sector, and a lot of volunteers. And we've been able to do that also because we think of people as human beings. So, you know, every one of us has been able to think to ourselves, well, if I was this person, I didn't have anywhere to go, what would I want? What would I expect to see? What support would I need? And we've been able to pull our public services together to support people. So of the 2,200 people we've got in, we're absolutely determined that we're not going to have a return to the streets. So we've just announced that our homelessness phase 2, £95 million to move people onto the safe, secure home that they deserve. And we're determined as well that people won't have more than one move in between. So you don't have this terrible feeling of insecurity as you're pushed from pillar to post. And we've been able to wrap around mental health support services, substance abuse services, domestic violence support services, relationship breakdown support services, and a variety of others, all based on good evidence from Fabian reports in the past. We've been really heavily reliant on making sure that we've got the evidence to make it work. And we're very determined to make it work. And the other thing we're doing, of course, is that we're building social housing at pace and scale right across Wales. In a real push now that we've managed to get the Tory caps taken off our councils, a real push to get us building again at that pace and scale. So as part of our homelessness recovery programme, we will be building an enormous number of social houses and mutuals and cooperative housing arrangements across Wales. And we're doing that as well in a carbon neutral or carbon passive way as part of our decarbonisation programme. And we're also doing something called an optimised retrofit programme, where we're getting all of our social housing from EPCC, which is the standard, sorry, I took in jargon all the time, you get used to it. It's the standard that we have that makes your home comfortable and warm in the winter and cool enough with good air in the summer. And our Welsh Housing Quality Standards has already brought our social housing stock up to C, and now our next push is to get it to A. So we've just announced a programme to do that for existing stock, and that we're going to build the new stock to EPC A. We're also announcing in 2 weeks' time our National Planning Development Framework, which I'm sure as Fabians you'll all be delighted to know looks nothing like the Tory programme that's been announced of building ticky-tacky stuff all over the place, but instead actually builds in our space standards, our good green infrastructure, our active travel plans, our proximity to our 21st century schools building programme, which of course we never took away in Wales. We built on the Labour programmes that were in existence in England until the Tories took them away, and we've got beautiful schools all over Wales as a result of that. And Andy, just too many more things to canter through at this point in time, but I'm always very pleased. I just want to say in response to young Fabians in particular, we're always very pleased to host people. We're always very pleased to allow them shadowing opportunities to come and work with us, to see what it is like to put those policies into practice, and to give people a chance to look at what we're doing in Power. But you need to be quick about it because we've only got until the end of March when we go into, we're prorogued then for our next elections. I cannot tell you how important it is that we keep hold of the Welsh Parliament, because what we've been able to do in Wales is a showcase for what Labour policies can really do, and it feels really different here. I came up to a Sustainable Cities conference in London just before the lockdown, and I was genuinely shocked at the number of people sleeping rough in the streets. We have some rough sleepers here in Wales, but nothing like the scale that you see in a Tory-controlled England. So we can show what can be done in practice. We've also learned lessons. We've learned things that we thought would work, but perhaps didn't work quite the way we wanted to, and we can help people see what that really looks like in solidarity with the rest of the Labour movement. So diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Andy, indeed, for giving me the opportunity to speak. Sorry for the quick canter through all the policies. Delighted to be here.
Julie, thank you so much. And as you say, an inspiration to the rest of us. Practical Labour policy in power, making a difference to people's lives. And now I'm delighted to be joined by another former chair of the Fabian Society, who is a member of the front bench team. This time it's Seema Malhotra, who leads on work in the DWP team. Seema, are you there? Do you need to be switched on?
I'm here, but I think my video's been switched off by somebody.
There we go. Are you able to press the button now?
Great.
Oh, fantastic.
I've pressed the button now. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew. And it is fabulous to be able to follow Julia. I thought that was a totally inspirational speech as well. And I will be getting out to campaign in Wales as soon as I can possibly make it out to join you. And it's a real pleasure to be here at the Labour Connected rally. I also want to congratulate the young Fabians and the Fabians Network on all their success, because as a former editor of Anticipations and chair of the Young Fabians, I can honestly say that my experience in the Young Fabians was where I built my political networks, and which truly gave me the confidence to one day stand for office. I was going to say that none of the early Fabians could have imagined a virtual digital rally like this, but actually an early Fabian, Ian Forster, wrote a short story, you might know this, Andrew, The Machine Stops, where everyone lives in remote pods linked by telescreens, which in some ways you could see as a spooky prediction of life in lockdown and having a Fabian debate. But seriously, I would say that the second best decision in my political life that I made after joining the Labour Party was joining the Fabian Society, because it is truly the hotbed of political thinking, of debate and political education. I learned through a lifetime of Fabian events, probably more than I did in university, and I have absolutely no doubt that in this next period ahead, as we rethink questions of social and economic policy, that Fabian debates will be at the heart of the new ideas in the Labour Party, and not least in my own portfolio area of jobs, employment and good work for all, where some of the thinking already emerging from the Fabians is incredibly influential in how we think about these debates and also our attacks on the Tories in Parliament. Because the Fabian Society is also more than a think tank. It's a political family, welcoming new members and opening the doors to its history and encouraging members to be part of its future, to share in its values, its culture of respect and impatience for change. So the Fabians, I think we can see as really a perfect balance of passion and reason. Reason is why we published the Facts for Socialists leading up to the Labour victory in '45. Reasons is why that we created the London School of Economics, and also why we created the New Statesman magazine. But our reason is also powered by passion and by purpose. And it's incredible to think that for 136 years, the Fabians have demonstrated how we've demonstrated our rejection of poverty, our revulsion at injustice, and our passion for progress. I'll just say a few words before I finish about our passion for progress and for gender equality, because our progress is for men and for women. We saw the leading role that the first Fabian women's group played in the fight for women's suffrage. We saw the role of women in the Fabian Society being more than that too, because the Fabians, led by Beatrice Webb, produced the Minority Report to the Poor Law Commission, sounding the death knell for Victorian paternalism and helping to herald the start of a welfare state based on the idea of social justice for all. It was the Fabians that founded the idea of the NHS. We championed comprehensive education. We pioneered the idea of the United Nations. And today we fight for jobs, for a green industrial revolution, for a decent NHS, for improved mental health services, for a world-class education for all, and for a roof over everyone's head. So the Fabians is a true powerhouse of progressive ideas, and our contribution to the 20th century politics is utterly unmatched. Fabian women have also written pamphlets over time on child labour, on school nurseries, on women's health, equal pay, all decades before the government took action. And when we founded the Fabian Women's Network 15 years ago this year, I never imagined how it would be so strong today. And I just want to say how proud I am of Ivana, Sarah, Christine, and so many others who have taken the mantle on of the FWN. So I'll just close by saying that we see that today inequality and gender inequality continues to be deep and deeply endemic. And on Saturday, Angela Rayner laid out why we still have the gender pay gap. It's because we still have a gender power gap. And we see that in our social policy, we see that in economic policy, and we see that in where power lies at the top of organizations. It is our task to win the battle of ideas. It's our task to help win the arguments in public. Post-COVID, people will want a better, safer, and more equal world. I know, as a member of the executive, that we have a lot to do. I know that we are the people to do it. And today I hope that together at our first virtual Labour conference, we'll put down the markers for that journey ahead. Thank you.
Seema, thank you very much. And I would now like to welcome another member of the Executive Committee of the Fabians, another woman who is breaking glass ceilings, and that's Labour's Shadow Chancellor, Annalisa Dodds. I'm going to have to switch on her video too. There we go. Annalisa, are you all right?
Yes, I definitely am. I have to say I'm intimidated coming at the end of such a fantastic parade of different speakers who've been so full of fantastic ideas. And I'm going to try at least to keep the energy up at the end of, or approaching the end of this Festival of Fabians. And I'm going to try and be really, really quick. I'm going to give 7 reasons why I think the last year has actually been one of the best years for the Fabians, and then 3 reasons why next year's got to be even better. Okay, so what are the reasons why I think the Society has been doing such a brilliant job this year, and why am I so proud to be involved with it? Well, first of all, obviously the membership has been growing, absolutely terrific. And despite, secondly, the challenging circumstances that we find ourselves in, it's been Fabian ideas very often which have been leading that debate. We've had fantastic reports coming out from the Society, brilliant engagement with those ideas from members. Number 3, we've seen the Fabians, I think, really leading very authentically in an engaged way around issues of diversity, both within the Fabians and within the Labour Party as a whole. I think that's so refreshing. It's really exciting. Number 4, we see Fabians in so many different key positions now within the party. I mean, we've just been talking about this, brilliant councillors, fantastic assembly members, also in Scotland as well, right across the Labour Party in Westminster too. And obviously, Andy's mentioned the fact that we're in many of those positions in the shadow cabinet too. Number 5, young Fabians. Obviously, Adam's covered that. I'm not going to repeat what he said, but I've been so inspired by their energy, the fact that they're really trying to involve particularly young people who might often be cut out of political discussions, that they're making it much more inclusive, making sure that we have those debates very much involving young voices. Getting to the end of that list, so I'm very proud also of our Scottish Association. I must say, obviously, I'm someone who has that background. I've been really, really impressed by the significant role that they've played, making sure that we have that home for people to engage in discussion about policy ideas, to get beyond the constitutional issues, to really engage on policy ideas in Scotland. So exciting to hear what Julie had to say about Wales as well. And then finally, what's the last reason why I've been so proud of the Fabians this year? Well, it would be because I think at a time, as we've seen, very difficult situations arising, obviously, with our relationship with the rest of the world, at a time when we see, obviously, our government threatening to actually break international law, at a time when our relationship with the Socialists and Democrats, the European Parliament, obviously is one that's no longer institutionalised. The Fabians have been absolutely at the forefront of making sure that we continue those international connections, working very closely with VEX on some very, very exciting research and different forms of engagement indeed. So a brilliant year, but here's why it's even more important that it's kept up, that hard work is kept up next year. First of all, because the spirit of the Fabians, that spirit of social engagement that we've seen actually across our communities, right across the country, is going to have to continue, because unfortunately we see still those problems of so many people living acutely vulnerable, precarious lives. They need that solidarity, and it's Fabian principles often that can provide it, because secondly, not only do we focus as Fabians on policy ideas, we also focus on how we can get there, how we can create the institutions to actually get there, to build that better life. And from the time of the webs onwards, that's what we've always been interested in, practical forms of socialism. And, you know, I couldn't have said better the way that Seema put it. You know, now is the time to revitalise that real zeal for those quality public services that came from the time of the webs and that's animated Fabians since. And finally, of course, because we need to have evidence-based policy, because when you have policies that aren't based on evidence, they don't change people's lives, they don't work, they don't make that change that's so necessary, particularly right now when so many people are struggling. So let's make sure that we keep that good work up. If you're somehow involved in this festival and you're not a Fabian, then please think about joining. I'm sure that you'll enjoy it. You'll find like-minded people there. Yes, we have discussions, we have disagreements sometimes, but they're always focused on that overall goal of making sure that we get to a better society, one where everyone can fulfill their potential, one where people are supported, not left to just sink or swim on their own.
Annalisa, thank you so much. And we're all coming towards a close. Two more speakers. The next one is a vice chair of the Fabian Society, also a parliamentary candidate at the last election, and a frontline health worker, a GP in East London. Delighted to welcome Martin Ebador.
Hello, Andy, and hello, Fabian members. It's so great to be here, and it's so great to follow a phenomenal list of speakers this evening. Like many of you, back in December 2019, I was devastated by the loss at the general election. However, in Keir Starmer, we have a Fabian at the helm of the Labour Party, supported by a plethora of amazing shadow cabinet ministers and secretary of states who are holding the government to account. It's great to see Fabians in position of power leading change in our party. I was also a former chair of the Young Fabians, and it's so great to see them doing so much phenomenal work. The Fabian Society shaped my political journey, and it has a crucial role in shaping the ideas that will lead to long-lasting progressive change in our country. This year, we've seen profound changes to our lives with the coronavirus pandemic, with almost 400,000 cases and over 40,000 people dead due to the shambolic response from the government. We've seen a potential resurgence of the coronavirus this fall. As an NHS GP, I've seen the devastating effect it's had on my patients, and like most people in this country, I've been personally affected by it. But what has kept me going is seeing the phenomenal work of Fabian Labour frontbenchers holding the government to account and putting a true alternative out there. In addition to that, we've seen huge social movements form this year in the form of Black Lives Matter. Following the tragic death of George Floyd, we saw protesters rise up in America, and we saw the protest also come to the United Kingdom. And it's made us reflect as a country on the structural and economic inequalities that exist in the UK. In the Fabian Society, we've also started to reflect on our history. And we have a race equality task force, which I chair, which is looking into our own practices within the Fabian Society to try to ensure that we are as open and as inclusive as possible. And I really want to thank Sarah Hyde from the Fabian Women's Network and Andy Harrop for helping to lead that charge. Here at the Fabian Society, we are an organisation that aims to truly reflect the nation. And with this Race Equality Task Force, we will ensure that we remain open and inclusive. I am very hopeful, despite what can be described as a difficult year. When I turn on my screens and look at the green benches, I see phenomenal women and men holding the government to account, putting radical, clear, evidence-based policies out there and challenging the toxic discourse of the Tories. I'm so proud to be a Fabian Society member, and I would encourage all of you who are here today on the call and who are not members to sign up right after this event. Being a Fabian means pushing progressive ideas which will change our nation for the better. And Andy Harrop and his team has been doing phenomenal work over the past few months, holding tons of online events, producing policy pamphlets on a weekly and monthly basis, impacting on the political debate. So there's so much to do. We have Fabian policy groups you can get involved in and get stuck in. We've got the Fabian Women's Network, Scottish Welsh Fabians, the Young Fabians, and of course, local societies. So there's something for you to get involved in. I'm so glad to be here, and additionally so hopeful for the future because we have Fabian Society members who are leading the charge. Thank you, Andy, and thank you all for being here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. And our last speaker tonight is another member of the front bench team. This time it's the Labour MP, Wes Streeting.
Good evening, Andy, and good evening, everyone else. It's been a great event, and I'm glad to have caught so many of the speeches this evening. Look, I think that one of the great things about the Fabian Society is, as we've heard from so many other speakers, the rich tradition of creating a space for people to debate ideas about our country's future. And that's really what the Fabian Society is all about. That's really what politics is all about. It isn't just a sort of a battle of competence, though that's very important. You know, we're seeing the spectacular consequences of government incompetence writ large during the middle of a pandemic. But politics isn't just a battle of who can govern most efficiently, most effectively. It's also a battle of values. And during the course of this pandemic, we've seen where conservative values have led our country. We've seen during the course of the pandemic the stark inequalities in our country deepen. There are some people for whom their savings have gone up and their incomes have continued to come in, and their disposable income has been held up pretty well. And there are others who are really, really struggling. They have lost their jobs or they've lost their incomes. And while the government was telling everyone to eat out, to help out, lots of people worried about how they were going to afford to eat in. But we should ask ourselves, and certainly ask the Tories, how it was that our country entered this pandemic as already one of the most economically divided and unequal countries in the amongst any of the advanced economies. There's a reason why so many people, particularly older people and disabled people living in care homes and residential care settings, were dangerously and needlessly exposed to this deadly virus. And it's the failure to tackle the huge problem of social care and how we look after people in our society. It was a failure of values. And there's a reason why so many young people saw their futures begin to fall apart in front of their very eyes at the hands of an algorithm. It wasn't just a failure of data scientists, it was a failure of values. Because I have no doubt whatsoever that had Kate Green been the Education Secretary and been presented with evidence weeks in advance that so many working class kids, so many young people from underrepresented backgrounds would be disadvantaged, I can tell you now those results would never have been presented and civil servants would have been told to go away and find alternatives. It was a failure of values. And our country can't cope with more conservative government for any longer, really. The tragedy of the last 4 general elections is that when Labour loses, the country loses. And I've been thinking about this crisis and what it means for our country, and about the sorts of major challenges our country and has faced over the last century, and how our party responds. And one of the things that I think we need to sort of draw upon as we think about where our country goes next is how the Labour government in 1945 offered Britain a positive, patriotic, internationalist vision for our country, and what was wrong with it and how we put it right. And that was about building public services fit for the age, And I think we have to think about now how we rebuild public services fit for the 21st century. It was about how we give everyone, whatever their background, a genuine stake in society, opportunity, security, a government that backs their ambitions and backs their communities to succeed. But it was also a really strong internationalist vision of Britain as an open, outward-looking country that champions the values of democracy, freedom and human rights on the global stage. And we didn't just build a welfare state for people at home, we built a global state and global institutions to help our world avoid ever repeating the horrors of the First and Second World Wars. So that's the level of ambition that we need for our country now. We have to do it in a spirit of humility and recognising that we have lost 4 elections and people are asking basic questions about our competence and fitness to govern. And, you know, we're not going to win the next election unless we're honest about it, unless we confront those issues, unless we take them on and we're prepared to change. We've had a leadership change and the country have noticed and they like our new leader, but politics is a team sport. We've got to change our party too. And, you know, forgive me for saying this because she's my boss, but I thought one of the great things about Annalisa Dodd's speech today was that she came across as a chancellor for our country who's got her heart in the right place and her head in the right place too. And you think about the difference a Labour government would be making right now if we were responding to this pandemic, making sure that if people do lose their jobs, that they've got a proper safety net and a springboard back to work with reskilling and retraining, making sure that people aren't needlessly employed by extending furlough in a pragmatic and flexible way, and making sure that viable businesses don't go under by helping them out, but also making sure that that support isn't unconditional and that business has responsibilities to society in return, whether that's the responsibility to take care of their workers or attaching green strings to the funding to make sure they're helping us tackle one of the biggest issues facing humanity, which is the threat of catastrophic climate breakdown. So look, the last general election was hard and that defeat was battering and crushing, but I feel hugely optimistic about the future of the Labour Party right now. I think people are beginning to look at the Labour Party as a potential credible alternative government in waiting, but we can't be complacent about that. We don't just have a mountain to climb. As someone, Labour MP said the other day, we've got Mount Everest to climb, but the good news about that is we conquered Mount Everest. We can conquer this Mount Everest, but that's going to need us not just to pull together and work together and fight together, but to build those positive ideas, that practical way of changing our country, change people can believe in. And that's how ultimately we'll win together. And the Fabians have got a huge role to play in that. So if you're not already a member, I hope you'll join. I hope you'll be part of that debate and discussion. And you will find in the Fabian Society, I think, a model of pluralistic, inclusive and welcoming debate and discussion that actually the rest of the Labour Party could learn from.
Wes, thank you so much. What a brilliant way of rounding off. So there you are, a festival of Fabians. We've heard from diverse voices from across the Fabian Society, and we've heard what the Fabian values are: internationalism, egalitarianism, collectivism, pluralism, practicality, empirical policy for governing. If you're not already a member, I'm sure you'll be joining. But to all our existing members, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.